Hi, my name is Katrina Crouch. I'm the owner and artist behind Blush Designs, where I create fine art wedding stationery for the bride who loves the old world aesthetic but doesn't want the stuffiness. Today I'm going to give you my top 5 tips for working with water, specifically modern watercolor florals. And at the end I'll throw in a list of my favorite supplies if you're getting started. Tip number 1, work from life. To avoid formula and getting cookie cutter with your images, specifically with flowers in this case, it's best to look at actual images of flowers. Don't find just one and do that over and over again, because that will again give you that cookie cutter appearance where all of your flowers look like they were just stamped. So I have a board on my Pinterest page that just says botanicals, and if I see a flower that I like, or if there's a flower that my bride is working with, then I just add that into that board. You can go so far as to merge different images together. If you are really struggling with this, something that my husband does a lot is he'll actually Photoshop the images together. Now he's a landscape artist, so he'll pick this river with that background and he'll Photoshop those all together from different pictures that he's taken. Then he's able to work right off of that photo and get the life that he's looking for in his painting. If you're working with florals, I've already done some of the legwork for you. You can find a link down below to my botanical Pinterest board where you'll find lots of different images of florals that I think are great to work off of. If you have a similar Pinterest board that you use for inspiration all the time, leave it in a link down below. I would love to check it out and maybe I'll find some beautiful things to add to my own boards. Tip number 2, warm up. I always warm up, whether it's on purpose or by accident. Usually if I don't warm up, the first piece I do ends up going into the trash. My best tips for warm-ups is set a timer and just go for it. Try something fun, but don't work off of the same exact photo you're going to use for your final. Does that make sense? We want to do something a little bit different so that your mind is fresh, there isn't any pressure there. Tip number 3, negative space is your friend. Don't be afraid to use it and leave some things blank. The negative space that you leave between the florals or between the individual petals will help to define the shape of the painting itself. Especially with more of the modern floral style, you're not going in with all the shading. It's hard to define what's in front, what's in back. Where's this blob end and that blob begin? Use the negative space, like I'm showing here, to define where the center of the floral is, to define where this petal ends and where that one begins. Think of it as the lines for your painting. Rather than having a literal line there, you have a line that pops up here and there very organically that just helps the viewer to make sense of the painting. Step number 4, add depth. There are many ways that you can add depth to a painting, but my 2 favorite are size and value. When working with size, you want to vary the size of your individual elements. So maybe your leaves are a little bit smaller because you have a large peony bloom. Maybe you have one larger flower and you have a cluster of little flowers next to it, or smaller berries. Instead of it looking like you rolled out cookie dough and just stamped a bunch of things, you know how cookie cutters, they're all the same size but they're just different shapes? That's not what we're going for. You want to have life in your painting, and one of the best ways to do that is to add that variety and that depth. Now value simply means shades of light to dark. So a value scale would go from black through the grays all the way to white. And that's kind of what you want to do in your painting. You want some nice light images, you want some medium midtones, and you want the deep darks. Sometimes I like leaves to be the darkest element in my painting. Sometimes it's the flowers. Whichever it's going to be, plan it out ahead of time. Step number 5, don't overwork a piece. It's easier to go back and add to your painting afterwards than it is to try and take paint off or to start over again. Try to relax. Put on your favorite music, your favorite podcast, let your mind wander. You don't want to think too hard about making these florals. Follow the image, but don't get too overwhelmed. When the timer goes off, step back and take a break. First up, I prefer Strathmore's 300 series watercolor paper. For paint, I go more for color rather than brand specifically. One of my very favorite colors actually comes from the Blick generic brand. So I don't really think that you need to be too picky, especially if you're just starting out. One of my favorites though is Winsor & Newton. I use them quite a bit. They have a good color selection. The pigment is good, except lamp black, I believe. I really don't like that one. Avoid lamp black. For paintbrushes, again, I'm not that picky. I've been using the Artify for a couple months and I do really like them. They're affordable on Amazon. I'll try and link those down below. But generally, I use the round brushes. I've used an angled flat brush in the past, but I always go back to the round. All right, before you go today, I want to know what your favorite watercolor tip is. Is it something that I said today, or is it something that I left out? Let me know. I'm always looking for new tips. I would love to do another 5 tips for watercolor, but I need your help. What are your favorite things? Before you go, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. I'll be posting more watercolor videos in the future, as well as some specifically for wedding invitations.